Welcome to Urban Nibbles, a series of short conversations about post-pandemic changes in the urban landscape. This is your host, Redain Abdo, and today I'm joined by Geoff Batzel, an urban planning and development consultant who's going to help set the scene as we launch this series. Welcome, Geoff.
Great to be here, Redain. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Interesting topics.
Great to have you. We are emerging from in the early stages of reopening across the globe. And to me, this is a time of great reflection. This past couple of months in particular, going through a time that in my lifetime, at least, where from every corner of the globe, there have been reactions to unusual situations and to establishing new norms. And I think a lot of us have been cocooned, not commuting within our homework environments, and hopefully reflecting. So I wanted to take advantage of this time, and I know that you've given some thoughts to certain aspects as pertaining to our profession in particular on urbanism, mobility, these things. Can you just help? This will be a short, concise one, but can you help set the stage for some of the things that you've been thinking about?
Sure. Well, nothing focuses the mind like a crisis, right? And during the heat of these things, it's pretty easy to pick things that need to change. I think what becomes more difficult is identifying things that are susceptible to permanent change that are due to the impetus of the given event, right? In this case, the COVID. And so, yeah, as you mentioned, one of the things is the forced inactivity of the many and the crazy level of activity of the few in this case, right? So there's been a lot of time for many people for deep thinking, right? So we should take advantage of that. But it's not always like that. I think that during the height of these things, we have a general tendency to overestimate what the continued momentum of some of these changes might be. Like, it just seems so obvious that these things need to change that it's hard to sort of understand, what are really susceptible for that type of thing. But setting priorities now when the view is clear, I think, has some real value. We're going to have a pretty short window of opportunity before the conflicting priorities descend and the frictions kind of bite and then some of the inertia reappears, right?
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Yeah. What are some of the bigger topics? We'll be addressing a bunch of things, but can you shed some light on the things that you've been thinking about?
Well, sure. Yeah, there's just so much, right? Some of it, though, that really sort of jumps to the fore is a little fraught issue of the first here. The first one is like sort of the rise of the surveillance technologies and the greater use of those in quote unquote open and democratic societies, right? Technology's been there for a long time, but now, they look at the evidence and the light came on and the brakes are off, I think, right? So the notion of mass profiling for health and safety is on. Mm-hmm. It's going to be there forever. And I don't think you dial these things back very easily, right? So, I mean, a lot of these technologies were kind of artificially, quote unquote, constrained by rules and regulations, which will now be relaxed. And so sort of nature will start taking its course on their surveillance piece.
For good and for real.
Yeah, for good and for real, of course. Yeah, absolutely. Another one that kind of leaves people giddier, though, a little more upbeat, is this whole working from home aspect, right? Like a big piece of it is a lot of people have been working out of their home, much more so than even prior. And there's only a limited number of people in the population that are able to do that, right? Like the bus driver can't work from home, and so 30% is an estimate by the Bureau of Labor Statistics that is sort of open for that type of thing. But for urban people, that's huge, right? Because it impacts commuting, all the structural implications, right? Commuting, city centers, office parks, neighborhood services, you name it. I mean, it just has a big thing. So that's a trend to watch.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And actually, these are a very good point. We'll be having a series of conversations on some of these topics.
So. Oh yeah, that's great, because that's a big one, right? And it's a part of it's self-interest, right? Because the people that generate content about things tend to be also the ones working from home, right? So it's getting a lot of press, but there's a reason for it. I think it'll be a big one. Mm-hmm. Another one of this is a really emotional one too, is the schooling from home, the e-learning, the sort of forced. What's going to happen to the school? Is it going to become a relic of the past? Do we need schools anymore now that we have all of this digital learning and individualized learning paths and all this stuff? Like, where is that going? This has kind of really pushed that to the fore and accelerated things, I think, by potentially decades. But I think that schools provide, from a community perspective, value beyond the textbooks. I think they're going to be a lot stickier for different reasons. If nothing else than just family logistics, eh? You know, kids need to do something during the day when their parents work in two-income world.
Yeah.
So I'd say that's a big one.
Yeah, and that one is also one of particular interest to me, given that the other part of my life is on e-learning with vulnerable populations. So this is ever more relevant in that.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's a big one. And another one that I think leaves people a little wistful or shortly will is the localized clean air and fresh water that's emerged when people, you know, economic activity slows, people don't move around as much. It becomes it's strange, in fact, how quickly these things were becoming apparent, that, you know, the air can clear, at least superficially, in a matter of days, and people start going, wow, we don't have to live like this. But it'll, you know, slowly go back to what it was before. But I do believe that the impetus for environmental protections, even after this, the economic problems we face are going to push them down a little bit, right? But that's not going to be stopped. I think we're going to make progress much more than before in this one.
I hope so. Mother Nature sent us to time out. Here's hoping that we've done some of our own reflection and behave well when we re-emerge.
Oh man! And then another one that some urban types worry about is the notion of the flight to the suburbs. Another flight to the suburbs. You know, several generations after the initial, for different reasons. But the idea that, you know, the city's just too concentrated, that, you know, you can't social distance in an elevator, and that people are going to try to push out to less dense areas. But it's just not an option for most people in the world, right? I mean, this is definitely what some kids would call a first world problem, of high-end markets and people with means. Most folks don't, and also I think it also underestimates the huge advantages of cities, why they formed in the first instance, right? That those things don't go away, but it is something that's in play, right? Like, there are going to be people that shy away from this stuff.
Yeah. Urbanization, density is what our careers have been all about, and let's see what kind of new reflections we do on that.
This swings and merry-go-rounds, isn't it? It's something. And another one is transit. What's going to happen to mass transit? I mean, much like the cities, I mean, are the close confines of the bus and the train going to prove too much? I mean, car ownership rate's going to, you know, keep, instead of declining, sort of level out or go back up. You know, how's the bicycle? You know, are we going to start really promoting that in a greater way? Because that seems to be an efficient, safe, and, you know, sustainable and excellent way to go about it. But honestly, for most folks around the world, mass transit remains the only viable option. There aren't really 100 other solutions out there for these, you know, the majority of the world. So there could be a temporary damping effect, obviously, as people do try to explore their options. But I think maybe it's more periods of masked transit than you know, before. So people will use it, but there'll be precautions. But there's no choice, really. And then finally on this long list, it's been going on a bit, but there's just so much out there. It would be urban food security. I think this crisis has demonstrated once again just how precarious the food supply chains into large urban areas are. Really, it shouldn't, I don't know how you feel about that, but it shouldn't really come as any surprise. Like, the whole purpose of cities in an evolutionary perspective is to free up people from having to feed themselves, so they can, you know, harness electricity, invent modern medicine, do things that are not agricultural. But I think what shocks people is that within 2 or 3 or 4 days, shortages occur. I mean, this isn't something that takes a long time to evolve. I mean, this is something that hits really sharp. So I think the increasing emphasis on, like, shortened supply chains, local production, strategic stockpiling, you know, you're going to recalibrate that balance between resilience and commercial efficiency. I think that's actually a very important point. But there won't, on the food front, I don't think there'll be any fundamental changes. This has been an urban issue as long as there's been cities, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, these are just some of them. Yeah.
No, I think you're spot on with so many of these, and thinking about localization, macro, micro, how systems work, our infrastructure systems, all of these things relate to how we've been moving towards the industrialization of things and the globalization of things. So all of this is now, for this short term, put into question, and let's see. And this is what the intention of these conversations is, to reflect upon some of these key areas and to spin them around and look at them in different lights, from this immediate aftermath to long term, and see where it goes.
Oh yeah, I'm excited to hear these other participants because there's going to be some interesting things said and good things to say. It's really good. Thank you very much.
Yeah, well, thank you for helping us launch it, and looking forward to continuing the conversation. Keep writing, keep shedding your thoughts out there,
Keep
please.
on keeping on. Take care.
All right, take care. Bye bye.